Leather finishes are pigments and compounds used to provide additional aesthetic and performance characteristics on natural leather. They are generally comprised of pigments, oils, waxes, resins, acrylics, and petroleum-based solvents. Some are used primarily for adding color, while others mainly for adding a protective layer to the leather's surface. We're going to take a look at a few of the most popular types up close so you can see exactly what they look like and if they're going to be a good fit for your next project. First up, we have Fiebing's leather dye. And these are essentially a pigment blended with a carrier liquid. In this case, it's an alcohol. Sometimes it can be water. When applied, the carrier helps carry the pigment into the leather fibers and then evaporates off, leaving the pigment bound to the leather fibers, changing its color. And here's an example of what the dye looks like on a piece of leather. And that leather looked similar to this prior to dyeing, and then now takes on that pigmented color. So dyes can be really useful if you have a piece of leather and you want to change that color to something else. Another way to change the leather's color is with paint. So whereas with dyes, which went into the fibers to change it, paint merely applies a pigmented coating on top of the leather. And it goes on the surface, changing the color, and in some cases providing some water resistance, scratch resistance, and abrasion resistance as well. Another option we have is something called antiquing. And antiquing essentially applies a pigmented blend of waxes and oils to the surface of the leather to help bring out the contrast between the lighter leather and the darker areas around it. This is going to be great for things that are tooled or carved or stamped, and really be able to give you an opportunity to add some unique gradients and characteristics to make it look like it's something that has been worn, used often, or is antique. Another option is to apply a wax and or oil compound. Here's a very popular example called toconol, and it's often applied while warm, by burnishing the leather, and then in that liquefied state, these seep into the fibers and then dry, providing some protection once those waxes are now going to be hard and set. And so these are great because they could help protect edges. They could add some scratch and water resistance as well, given the unique compounds that it's got. And often it dries relatively clear and doesn't change the surface color of that leather all too much, making it an addition that can add some great characteristics without really detracting much from the leather itself. Sometimes we're looking for something to seal that leather up. So here's an option called Resolene. And these types of sealants usually have a pigment. It could be Resolene, a bag coat, or some type of a sheen of different consistencies. They even have different colors. And they're usually petroleum based, which are plastics or vinyls. And that way they help provide a water resistant barrier over the leather. And some can have a pigment included to help change that tint of the color or the end appearance once it's dry. And essentially it creates a relatively water resistant, sometimes waterproof barrier to help reduce rub off from dyed leather. Also helps reduce water staining and things like that. And you can even see here, it's got kind of a shiny sheen to it in terms of its overall finish. And that's due to the composition, which in this case is an acrylic finish. So that's going to give you that shiny reflective surface and that water resistance as well. And sometimes we want to apply a finish that's going to change the way our surface looks. So here's an example of the Angelus Matte. It's an acrylic finisher. Essentially, it can provide some scratch and abrasion resistance and a smooth top coat onto leather items. So you can get finishes in all different varieties, even beyond this manufacturer. Glossy looks. This one, for example, is a matte look. So it's going to help reflect less light and have more of a muted look while still offering protection. And if we take a look at it, we can kind of see how it reflects And then if we take an example of just paint itself, so this is essentially matte finisher that was applied over the Angelus paint. So if we look next to each other, right here is the paint that dried, and on the right side is a light coat of the matte finisher. So you could see like there is a difference in what that matte finisher has done to that paint. And if you applied more of the matte finisher, you'll be able to get much more of that result. But I wanted to do just a little bit to be able to show that subtlety. And then obviously in acrylic paints and finishes, the way your brush strokes are applied are going to show through when it dries. So this is clearly an example piece, and also to keep in mind when you are painting to have nice, smooth, even application so that when it dries, it's going to look professional and good in the end. So yeah, this is how the matte finisher looks and works. And that will provide some protection as well. And another popular finish is waterproofer. So waterproofer is essentially a substance, most often is clear, who is going to provide a barrier between the leather item and the environment around it. It's going to help make it water resistant, in some cases waterproof. It can also make cleaning leather a little bit easier as well, since you do have now a layer between the environment and those fibers. Soiling will accumulate just on the surface rather than going into those fibers as much. And also it can be a little bit of a waterproofer as well, keeping water beaded up on top rather than really getting deep into and penetrating the leather itself. So for example, if we look at this, it's kind of a paste formula. And it just goes on, and then it dries relatively clear where you barely know that it was applied versus the original color of the leather. So each one of these finishes often comes with a lot of variations to it. They can include different formulas from different companies. They can have color variations, different densities of the composition. For example, some are going to be thicker and paste-like this antiquing finish. It's going to be very dense. Whereas others are going to be, more liquid-like, kind of like this acrylic finisher. You could even hear it. Some are going to be more, compound and almost moisturizer-like. If we look at our toconol. And then others are going to be very paint-like, and because they are, acrylic paint. So there's going to be a lot of variation in terms of options that you've got, consistencies, densities, thicknesses, how it's going to rest on your leather, color options, tints. So whatever you're looking to do, getting a little more familiar with these is going to help, and then you can find out which may work best for what you're trying to accomplish. Whatever you use, with a little bit of practice, you'll likely get some excellent results. So if you have questions, let us know. If you've used any of these or have preferences or experiences to share, definitely let us know. We'd love to hear them. And there you have it. Until next time.